support. I keep up with you via Facebook throughout the week and see all the great things that you're doing, not just here in this church, but also in the community in the city of Dallas, Texas, and Grand Prairie, all the places that you reach to. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. It is much appreciated. Shall we pray? Gracious loving God, we're grateful for this day and for this place that you created years ago for us to come from across the area to come and worship you, to share our joys and concerns, to be in fellowship with each other, and just to be renewed as your people of God. And we're grateful for the ministry and time and effort of so many in this church and many who are not with us, for the difference they make in the lives of people wherever they go. And I'm grateful. It's always a great feeling to be here among relatives, among friends, as we come to worship you, and as we come to listen to what you have in store for our lives, what you call us to do, not just in the life of the church, but in our families, in our workplaces, our schools, all the places you send us to. So anoint me this day as I come to share this message with a grateful heart. It is in His name we pray. Amen. Amen. I think everyone, perhaps across the country, has now heard of United Baptist Church as a result of our 2019 Special General Conference that was called in St. Louis. I drove up and back, and on the way home on Thursday, in the ice and cold weather, I was listening to the radio and on public radio and everywhere in the morning, getting ready on the national news, seeing pictures and video clips of friends and colleagues from the conference there. Newspapers, everyone talking about what this denomination did. The third largest denomination in the country, United Baptist Church is. And so, of course, it would take much attention. For those who may not know, the special called conference started in 2016, was to address several issues of human sexuality, including the ordination of gay and lesbian clergy, and whether or not clergy could marry people of the same sex couples. And every mainline denomination in this country, the Episcopalians and the Lutherans, Presbyterians, have dealt with this issue. The United Baptist Church is the only one who has not taken any action on this matter. And it's the most difficult 4 or 5 days. We're there from Friday night till Wednesday, Wednesday morning when it finished. Myself and Josephine Deere, who's our former Director of Connectional Ministries, and Reverend Margaret Johnson, Ms. Pearl Thomas represented the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference. We're among about a little over 860 delegates. Jennifer Neal, who has served as one of the secretarial assistants for the past probably 2 or 3 conferences. Jennifer, maybe going back further. Jennifer was present representing the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference in Dallas, India. So Jennifer, thank you for that. Jennifer put in long days of doing all kinds of work, and we appreciate her being there. Jennifer can give us the exact numbers because she knows those things and working with them. So 2 years to prepare for this, and delegates from around the world who gathered to talk about this issue, to debate, so forth as well. And then there'll be many people who came because they had an interest. And at home, I taught in the School of Religion at Oklahoma City University, teaching biblical literature, world religions, other courses, and work with our students, Native students, on one of the sponsors for the Native American Society. And so I know many of the students who were there, and one of the classes that came was studying United Methodist Studies, and so about 14 of the young men and women came, and many of them I knew. And so earlier that day I sent them a text, checking on them, wondering how they were doing, and they were listening to the debate and torn up by the manner in which we treated each other that day. And so the sponsor, who's a longtime friend of mine, said, come and visit with them when you get a chance. It's a break. I went to see them and listen to the questions. So later that night, we took them to dinner. We had a chance to talk, to enjoy each other, and just to share about their stories after that. But the best part of hearing the stories was the life of these young people who were there, to listen to their hopes and dreams for their futures, what they were going to do when they finished school. Some were about to graduate serving as pastors in the Oklahoma Annual Conference. 2 or 3 were going to go on to become ordained. One hoped to be a chaplain at a children's hospital because of his experience with children and what had happened to him as a child. Another had hoped to be a writer for United Baptist Publishing House. All sorts of talents and gifts that these young people had. They were energetic, they were excited, and they were so talented, and they are so talented and gifted. And so we ended the night well, and we knew the next day would be difficult, but yet, as adults do, we share good words. There's always hope, sisters and brothers. So we shared those words of hope, knowing that tomorrow would be a difficult day as well for that. So the next day, of course, deliberated, nothing happened, things changed, nothing passed, and so at the end of the day, again, we went to check with them, and they were in tears, they were downhearted, mostly because their understanding of whatever we believe on the issue was everyone in that room and across the world are children of God. We're all beloved, regardless of who we come from, where we come from, our ethnicity, our sexuality, that they understand that we're all cherished people of God. And so they were hurt by how we treated each other there that day, and so I went to see them at break, and they were just in such bad shape, and so I went back to my seat, texted Bishop Nunn, who was up on the platform, and said, at the end of the break, come and meet with us and have a prayer with our students, which he did. It took a while, so myself and a few of the delegates went over, and all we could do was to sit and listen and just to be present there, talking about what goes on. And so as I thought about that week, I thought about the issues, and of course the people at home. JB is certainly right that my task and my love has been serving the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference for so many years. As a young boy, we were sharing earlier, many who I know in the life of this church that we traveled to youth gatherings with over the years and all sorts of things. And so my love is certainly here in the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference. So the passage I found was the one for the lectionary today, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, if you want to follow along, chapter 3, beginning with verse 12. And this passage is one that I like because as I think about the issues we debated last week in St. Louis, and about the people who feel like they're not accepted, or people who feel like they're not loved, I thought about our own indigenous peoples around the country and around the world. Because our ancestors have been in those places. We've been people, think about our ancestors who have been through far much more than what we've been through last week. And yet they maintained their faith and they maintained their trust, and most of all, they maintained their hope in God. That despite what's going on, God would see them through the most difficult times. And so this passage, I think, echoes the journey of our ancestors. Those from the southeastern part of this country, mostly our Choctaw people and Cherokee people, Creek people, who were first evangelized by the Methodist Church in the early 1820s. Removed from the homelands, sent out on the trails of tears by the Oklahoma. So here are these words, beginning with 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 12. And the Apostle Paul writes, "Since then we have such a hope, we act with great boldness. Not like Moses, who put a veil over his face to keep the people of Israel from gazing at the end of the glory that is being set aside. But their minds were hardened. Indeed, to this very day, when they hear the reading of the Old Covenant, that same veil is still there, since only Christ has it set aside. Indeed, to this very day, wherever Moses is read, a veil lies over their minds. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. And now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit is, the Lord is, and there is freedom. And all of us with unveiled faces seeing the glory of the Lord, as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image, from one degree of glory to another, for this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. Therefore, since it is God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, let us not lose heart." The Lord bless the reading of these words. I pulled up about 3 passages from this reading that I think talks about where we are in the life of the church and the lesson that God has in store for us, and that's in verse 12. The Apostle Paul says, "Since then, we have such a great hope, we act with great boldness." Since we have such a hope, we act with great boldness. I know that as Native peoples, especially in this country, are people who know what it's like to be told that we are less than others. If not called less, then my friend, good friend, the Reverend Nita Phillips, would say we are often called the invisible people because no one understands that we're still here, still present. When references are made to special ethnic groups, if you make applications, we find Asian and Hispanic, African American, and often you'll find a place where there is simply no spot for Native American people. And oftentimes, even the life of the church, JD, I was filling out something a while back, and they asked me to read the survey, and lo and behold, we were not listed. And so I picked up the phone, called up the head, and said, You forgot about us. What's going on? And of course, they offered an apology, and the next time we looked at it, we were listed there, Sandra. In the life of the church, if people forget, Native American people are still here. So we understand that. We have to remind people over and over and over. And I know you do here in the city of Dallas, Texas, about our presence, our uniqueness in the world as indigenous peoples. The greatest problem with the actions at this General Conference is that people are led to believe they're less than, and therefore they're not a part of God's kingdom. That is the biggest problem, my sisters and brothers. Those who today are pondering whether or not they want to be a part of the church, but they're not welcome, where they are not loved. There are many, after hearing the story, we often share our stories, and next week after, I believe, your pastor's joining us from the city. We're doing a 4-day immersion. About 35 people from across the country are coming for 4 days, 5 days, to learn about the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference. We'll be at Cheyenne Country and be up at White Eagle and Creek Country, and exposing people to who we are as Native American people. And often they hear our history, our stories, removal, and many will say, how can you still be a part of the church with all this happening to your people? How can you still claim to be a Christian because of all the bad things that's happened to your people? And my sisters and brothers, it is a valid question. It's a good question that people ask, and sometimes we have to stop and think about our response. And then I think back to our ancestors, those who accepted Christianity and saw how the church lived it out. I marvel at the faithfulness of those tribal families who made the journey from the homelands and they survived. Historians and oral histories tell us that when the group of Choctaw people arrived in southeast Oklahoma, one of the very first things that they would do is to set up Methodist churches. See, they were already Methodists. On the trail, they were Methodist people, and so when you travel to southeast Oklahoma, some of you are descendants from those places like Bethel Hill United Methodist Church, way in the far southeastern part of the country. Tupelo, which is those two themselves who will debate which of those churches is the oldest. Can you imagine the faithfulness of those men and women after all they had been through, suffered loss and life, and one of the very first things they do is to set up churches, which is a symbol of their faith in God, of their trust in God. So despite whatever's happened, that God will see them through these ups and downs. It's amazing to stop and think about their faithfulness. So over 175 years later, here you sit, people of Dallas Indian United Methodist Church, remnants of those people, ancestors who planted those seeds, who held out the hope in Christ that good things were going to happen. Yesterday, one of my friends at a meeting gave me a handout on Choctaw music. I asked her some questions about songs. I said, which of these hymns, Choctaw hymns, do you think were written on the trail, were composed on the Trail of Tears? And so she found me this piece, and that's why I asked for the hymn, Thank You, Freeman, for singing Choctaw Hymn 11. It's one of my favorite hymns. And so the article says that hymns like number 11, 55 that you sing in this church, that they were both hymns that were created on the Trail of Tears. So can you imagine that? We heard these beautiful words, and here is the English translation for those words. Written again on the Trail of Tears. Suffering hardships, being removed in the middle of the winter on riverboats in the winter time. The faithful Choctaw people would say, here's the translation, number 11, composed in the Trail of Tears. The good land sets on high. All must come, all must believe. You must believe in Jesus, you must believe. Let's go, for Jesus loves us. Jesus died in one place and he rose. Let's go. What powerful words. We sing the Choctaw translation, often don't know those words, but they think about these men and women and families and children going along the trail, and instead of being downtrodden, this is the song they created. A song of hope, a song of trust and belief in Jesus Christ. Amen. So my sisters and brothers, I'm astounded to think about our ancestors who moved from the homelands, leaving everything behind, and the faith is still intact. The faith is still intact. So from illness, death, loss of land, everything that was there, it was gone. And all they say in is, let's go. Let's go, let's trust in God that God will lead us and God will take care of us in the lives. Secondly, Paul says, that all of us with unveiled faces sing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror of being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the one Spirit. Paul talks about what it means for us to be transformed. All of us, I think, in the life of this church can think back about the times, many times that God has transformed us. When we've gone astray and God pulled us back. People in the life of the church pulled us back, they loved us back into reality. And so time after time, God has transformed us to be the people that we are to be. And for many of us, most of us, God still transforms us. God still teaches us and helps us to be better people all along our journey. On my mother's side, some of you perhaps have heard this story of an aunt on my Cherokee side who passed away 4 or 5 years ago, Annabelle Mitchell. She was a full-blood Cherokee, and early in life became interested in making pottery. Not just the pottery, the wheel, the rest, but she wanted to understand how Cherokees made it years and years ago. So she and my uncle would travel to southeast United States, Tennessee and Georgia, and to listen to the Cherokee people and to research about the original way that Cherokees made these pottery. And so she learned and she became so very, very good, and she became a master potter. The very first national treasure that the Cherokee Nation did was to my aunt. Cherokee author Renard Strickland from my hometown, Muskogee, wrote that she is described as the mother of modern Oklahoma Cherokee pottery. And she taught many people. Most Cherokee potters were students of hers. And as a child, we would go to visit her house, and she would have beautiful pieces all over the house. Most of the windows were set up very high, so we could not get close to those. And her family and my family, we all had big families. We would go, and I'd be amazed at the beauty of her creation. Intricate, just beautiful pieces in her house. And so later in life, we would have some clergy events. We'd come together just to come and hang out, make crafts, and enjoy ourselves. And she and her daughter, Victoria, would come to an event for a clergy to teach us how to make pottery. And I would watch her create those beautiful pieces. She did it so easily, with such ease. And myself and Jennifer Neal can tell you this, when I'm with my colleagues, I have a hard time concentrating on what I'm doing, because I'm too worried about what they're doing. For that, Linda will perhaps disagree with that, but that's what I meant. So I realized I couldn't do it, Linda, so I came up with the worst looking pieces, and so I said that there's a young man there, Tony, who, Jimmy White's son, Sam. Sam was deaf, and so she paid very careful attention to Sam, and she worked with him. Sam had the most beautiful pots, and she still would ask about him from time to time, and so I thought, if she would do that for Sam, maybe she would do that for me. So I played like I couldn't do anything. And so before it was over, and she made me the most beautiful piece of pottery that I could also claim as my own, since I did part of it there, still at my house. And so I would watch her in those pieces, and as pastors, J.B. Jackson perhaps will tell you that pastors all the time, everything we do, we're always looking for illustrations of how we can help others to understand the Scriptures and God's presence in our lives. And so as I watched her make that clay, I asked her, I said, tell me about how you start that process. How do you know what you're going to make whenever you begin with that lump of clay? And she says, a lot of times, David, she says, the clay, listen to this, the clay decides what you want to do. I start out wanting to do something, and the shape isn't what I wanted. So I go into another shape, and I started with the straight up cylinder, and if I can, and from there you can go on and make all kinds of shapes. In the process of making it, she said, you can come up with exactly what you want, but sometimes the clay has its own idea. You then go that way and you have a different shape. And then she said the potter over a long period of time has a pretty good control of the clay, but the clay still has a mind of its own. Did you hear that, J.B.? The clay still has a mind of its own, so the other thing, a lot of times I will start something and I'll tear it down and I will start all over. There's no use to go ahead with something that I don't like. Then I'm able to use the very same clay, and after I get it wet, it can be reused, it can be reshaped. To me, she said, it is like God. God is the great potter, and God molds us the way God wants us to be. God is the great potter, and God molds us the way that God wants us to be. My sisters and brothers, and that's where we're at as people of God, that God takes us. Some of us, it may be yearly, some of it may be weekly, daily. God takes us, transforms us, and only God has the ability to transform us to be the people that God calls us to be. Amen. Lastly, maybe my favorite piece of this reading is that the Apostle Paul says, therefore, since it is by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, we do not lose heart. Sam says, by God's mercy, we are engaged in this ministry, we do not lose heart. I will mention my desire, perhaps, to serve in this conference and to be a voice for Native peoples everywhere and for social justice to my predecessor, the late Reverend Dr. Thomas Ruffey, Sr. I was fortunate to work with him in the office of Oklahoma City since 1995. And I learned a lot from him, whether it was intentional or not. Thomas, he was a great storyteller. He would come into my office and would sit down and would talk. And if I asked him a question, it was answered with a story. So therefore, if I was in a hurry, I needed an answer to a question, and I didn't ask him a question. That's went on. So, which means you had to have time to listen to the stories. He would go back, 30, 40, 50 years, and then eventually he comes around to the story. That's where he was at. And so after his passing, I was so thankful that I got to listen to those stories. Some I got to record, and I realized then how important it was for us to stop and listen to people with great experiences in life. And that's still true today. Sisters and brothers, for those who are fortunate to have our parents and grandparents and others with us, for us to take advantage of that. It's a joy to get to see Henrietta today, who reminded me she was, I think everybody knows this, so won't be in trouble, that she's 86 years of age. Years ago, 20 years ago, 15 Henrietta, she brought, I don't know what happened, maybe nobody else would, but she brought a group of young people from the Dallas, Indian to Bacon College for youth camp. And what a trooper, I think she's by herself, bringing those young people there, and she hung with them for that. So I appreciate getting to see Henrietta there. But Tom would talk about the stories of the Indian mission and living during the time of great oppression and racism from our sisters and brothers in the Oklahoma Annual Conference, who for years had control over much of what happened in the Oklahoma Indian Mission, as it's called then, the Oklahoma Indian Mission. Those who are here, like Henrietta and my aunt, 70s and 80s know what I'm talking about. They'll still refer to it as the Indian Mission. That's how they know it there. And so he would talk about the struggles to maintain our Indian identity. Most of all, he wanted people to know that Indian people, Native people, was as good as anybody else. That we were competent. We're able to do all these things that people thought we could not do. And that was always his struggle. One of my favorite stories is that in the 70s, our pastors began to come to school at Perkins School of Theology. Dallas Indians taken very good care of our pastors over the years, Rudy, and we appreciate that much. But before that, they would not, that's what everybody did. They would go to a school up in the city, and Tom said they would have some classes there, and they were not much of a class. The student pastor didn't have to bring paper and pencil and anything with it. They just came and sat. And so one day, Tom said he asked the instructor, he says, how do you grade these pastors? They have no paper, they have no pen, they just sit there. And he said, well, when I'm teaching, and if they're looking at me straight ahead, paying attention, then I give them a passing grade. And Tom looked at him and he said, don't you know that Indians can sleep with their eyes open? And so that blew it for him. And from that time, we insisted that the people come to school here at Perkins to be like everybody else. That we're smart enough, wise enough. Even the full-bloods that only spoke the Choctaw language would come to Perkins School of Theology, and we'd find an interpreter to interpret for these men and women who would get through these things. So Tom would tell those kinds of stories about what would happen and how people treated us for that. And so whenever the Indian Mission Conference became a conference in the 70s, he talked about those who opposed it, mostly white folks who opposed it. And one of the officials told Tom at one time, and this was his big mistake, he said, you Indians are getting too big for your britches. I said, those would be fighting words for Thomas Ruffey Sr. And then at the time, of course, the bishop, who's now deceased, did not support that decision at all. And they did it, so the vote was taken, and we became the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference, and we received, like today, much funding. And Tom was at the Oklahoma Annual Conference meeting where they gather. He said, I did not want to go, but I had to go. And so he went, and one of the superintendents came to him and said, Tom Ruffey, look what you've done. He had a sheet of paper. Tom would love to tell the story. Look what you've done. You see this sheet? This is a list of all of our churches and how much money we give you. $125,000. And now because of what you've done, it's going to be gone. church is going to stop giving, so you're going to have nothing. And Tom said he looked up, he said, that's okay. He said, we'll be okay, we'll live with it. But he said, deep down inside, I was about to pass out when he told me that. Thinking, what in the world have we done to lose that? The same day, another pastor, the treasurer, I think, of the conference came to Tom. Tom was in looking at the Cokesbury bookstore. He loved books, and he was looking down. He said, the man came up to him and said, Tom, don't look up. Just look down. But he talked with him and said, I just came from a meeting with the superintendent, and we're not cutting the funds to OIMC. Matter of fact, we're going to give you an increase for the funding. And Tom shared how elated he was to hear that news and the support of the people who were doing the right thing. So we talk about people engaged in God's mercy, not losing heart, making decisions that we know may be difficult, but not losing heart, knowing that God is in the midst of all that's going on. I think about Tom and his life and the ministry and what's going on. Tom was one that did not lose heart. That because of his leadership of words, he inspired others to move along and to claim who we were as and are as Indian people, knowing that we're as capable and competent as anybody else in the life of the church. We do not know, sisters and brothers, what the future holds for the United Methodist Church even today. There are churches of all sizes, big churches here in the city of Dallas, Texas, Methodist churches. We're already talking about leaving the denomination. I was with the folks, and at the end of the day, talking about leaving, creating their own denomination. Some leaving for good. Some churches in North Texas, two of our largest churches in Oklahoma and the conference are having those same discussion. They tell me themselves at the end of the day. And there's already a large gathering being planned in Kansas to discuss the future of what we're going to do. What I do know, and I sent this out in a letter last week, maybe you'll probably get it tomorrow. What I do know is that in my conversations with people across the Indian Methodist Conference and my churches, that is a desire to stay together as Indian people, as a conference. This church itself is a classic example of a place that gathers, and as two or three have shared with me today, how much they enjoy being here because of the love that is present in Dallas Indian United Methodist Church. And my sisters and brothers, that says a lot for what you're doing. Reminding you to gather folks together and you love one another, because that's what we're called to do as people of God. So we stop and think, but I hope toward the future, one, that we will stay together as a conference to do what we're called to do. We've seen the fruits and labors of men and women, faithful from many, many tribes, who have sacrificed, they've loved, they've taught, they've preached, and they've loved us all into being. And it's my experience that all of these things going on, that while everybody scrambles to figure out what's going to happen, it will be us who will be left behind. One of my good friends who lives here in Dallas, Texas, as part of the North Texas Conference, Hispanic, texted me yesterday. We were talking. I saw him last week. He said, talking about the gathering of churches in Kansas, he said, I hope that they will remember people of color when they began talking about forming a new denomination. He and I both hope and pray, but we know the reality of what may not happen. So we stop and think about what happens and what's going to happen for us for years to come. And while we as Native people are diverse, there are uniting characteristics that shape our lives. You live it every day, we all live it, what it means for us to be hospitable. The hospitality we offer to everyone. The relationship, the importance of relationship with all the tribes, all people, we don't agree we are. And the importance of community. The importance of community. Long before our native peoples were removed from our homelands and sent to what is now Oklahoma, we were people who understood what it meant to make decisions for the good of the whole tribe, the whole community. We understood what it meant to offer a welcome to everybody, to give the best of ourselves, even to our own detriment. And we know what it means to have decisions made for an entire group, sometimes decisions that are life-giving, and sometimes decisions that are death-dealing. For my sisters and brothers, we know what it means to make decisions for the entire community. Some of you know the story, but Iroquois people years ago, they lived, and they still do, they live with a view that encompasses 7 generations. So when decisions are made, they bring with them 3 generations looking back. And as they make